but always that which is fulfillment, that upon which our own consciousness has turned with acceptances, brings to us joy, brings to us the satisfaction of beauty. As we then go further, we observe that these standards of beauty change with our maturing, so that by degrees we become more refined. But at this point in his discussion, Plotinus also draws in an allegory or lines from the wanderings of Ulysses. He describes the wanderer returning to his own shores after being long away in the terrible tragedy of the Trojan War, and then in those long and harrowing years of adventure, in which at last, shipwrecked many times, subject to the most terrible labors and exertions and deprivations, Ulysses at last comes home. And as he nears his own land, the wanderer pauses. All his life, all through these years, he has waited and dreamed of this homecoming. But as he approaches it, he does not even recognize the shore. Something has changed. Things are not where he thought they were, because in all those lonely years he had built another land. He had built a mental or inner vision of his homeland that was totally ungeographical. And by degrees he had strengthened minor errors in his thinking, and he had misplaced the cities and the houses. They were all much bigger and more beautiful in his dream than they were in reality. And as he came home, he did not know where he was. Well, finally, however, of course, he realized and was united with his own waiting soul, Penelope, who had been making the tapestry that is never finished. All of these legends and allegories deal with this same problem, the struggle of life to return to its own proper and natural state. Then Plotinus goes on to contemplate how man, in his own thinking, in his own living, can advance himself in beauty. And he examines beauty on the level, we might say, of order, of that golden mean which is summarized in the statement of Socrates, in all things not too much. And Plotinus comes to the conclusion that somewhere in the mystery of beauty is the factor of moderation, that in every excess things run to deformity, that the moment our thoughts, our emotions, or our actions become excessive, something goes wrong. Excessive attitudes afflict, distort, and disease the inward perceptions of the individual. They cause him to fall under the influence of excess, and therefore to create habits which destroy beauty and deform natural character. So, Plotinus turns from all extremes to find that moderation which is beauty. Moderation, then, affirms beauty to be a kind of balance, that like a pair of scales, both pans at the ends of the scales by their tippings destroy beauty, which is suspended at the center beam. All things move around the sovereignty of the eternal sun. And the sun is the most beautiful of all forms because it is light itself. And thinking therefore of moderation, Plotinus thinks of light. And in thinking of light, he points out that light reveals beauties. Because if these things are dark, we cannot even see them. But light brings them into strange and wonderful relief. But light itself can instantly destroy beauty just as easily as it can produce it. And there is very little beauty if the light is too strong or the shadows are too deep. It can also blaze with too much evident light upon some fragile or sensitive subject and thus deform it. For there are some things that are most beautiful at night, under the stars and the moon, and other things that are beautiful when the sun goes behind a cloud. So light plays a very important part, for light is forever revealing beauty. But light itself traces strange forms in beauty, and all who have stood on the edge of the Grand Canyon at different hours of the day will know what I mean. The light alone changes every shape, and yet nothing itself is changed. Light comes from within man. Light, therefore, can strangely release or conceal beauty. Light, as absolute materialistic realism, can blaze upon a thing and kill every sensitive line that it contains. Light also, shadowed, can make the new building look old. Light, clouded, can muddle the surface of the world. Light, eclipsed, can change all things into a greenish, grayish darkness. So light can make things look alive and make them appear dead, according to its usage. And there is nothing that is a more wonderful sculptor or a molder of forms than light itself. If light, therefore, can by these processes change things, then light can also empirically release, reveal, conceal the beauties of things as they are. This light in man can do these things also. The light of cold reason is one kind. The light of love that can see no defect is another. The light of friendship, which accepts defect and remains the friend. All these things show how the light within the individual can mold and change the subjects and substances of the world around him. This light can be likened to the mind. And things then may not be good or bad, but thinking can make them so. And the mind, therefore, can with a sweep of its own power destroy beauty, or create it, or redeem it, or reveal it, subdue it, conquer it, annihilate it. And yet the objects seen are themselves always the same. So we come to another problem. Is beauty then a light and shadow? Is beauty in some way changing like the seasons? It is, but it is in all seasons. Therefore, it is one, though ever changing. And it is therefore forever the unity of its own nature. In the ancient Greek system upon which the doctrines of Neoplatonism are built, the whole existence came out of the mysteries of an aging time. The eternal power resident at the root of things, being total and absolute, the principle of principles. And from this eternal being, by the minglings of its power, came into existence ether and chaos, the creating and the created. And these whirled together, moved in vast nebulas whirling in space, until finally of their strivings was formed the egg of Phanes, the strange mysterious egg with its upper hemisphere of gold and its lower hemisphere of silver. And finally the egg burst open, and a great light came out, and the radiant power of Phanes emerged, with many heads and arms, and the bodies and faces of all creatures. And this blazing protagonist brought light to the whole world. And from this light came all the orders of light. And light means knowing, means the power to observe, the power to see, the power to be. And also came from this also the darkness, from which was generated those things which may be known, those things which may be seen, those things which can be the object of the power. Therefore the power and its object, like almost an Ahriman, came forth out of the great egg of eternity. And therefore in man's soul also there is this power to see, and there is also the ever-present shadow of the thing seen. Thus beauty now, like music, demands some other values. A magnificent work of art in music, a great orchestration, requires not only a wonderful orchestra and a composer, it requires a proper audience. It can be totally lost if the audience is unable to appreciate it. And strangely, an unappreciative audience will gradually corrupt the orchestra. They cannot function properly. Something strangely communicated means that the pattern is wrong. The situation is not right. Therefore, the harmony is not duly and completely transmitted from the composition to the audience. Thus, in beauty, we have this problem. Not only the power of the seer, but the powers and principles of the things seen, or the things experienced inwardly and outwardly. All these are factors and elements that must go into this great search for the substance of the beautiful itself. To perhaps summarize some points that will take too long to discuss in absolute detail, Plotinus comes to the ultimate conclusion that beauty exists apart from the beautiful. That beauty is, and that it can be bestowed, but that it also can be taken back, that it can be separated from and rejoined to. Not because it can ever be completely deprived, but because it is forever in itself changing. The beauty of life is taken from the dead, but the beauty of the dead remains, and it too is beautiful. The beauty of growth is taken from the mature, but maturity takes its place and is also beautiful. Yet these beauties are not the same. Therefore, they cannot merely arise within an organism. They are the adaptations of organisms to a principle. And each change in that organism reveals another aspect of something superior to itself, the principle of beauty. Thus, there are many different musical compositions, may all be beautiful, but they are not the same. Therefore, beauty is not locked in any one of them, or it could not be conferred equally upon another. Nor is beauty locked in sound, nor is it locked in light. Therefore, beauty has an existence apart from these things because it is superior to them. And it must be superior to them, or it could not be diffused through them variously. If it was identical with them, or co-eternal in them, it would be restricted by them, and some things could not possess it at all. Actually, there is nothing which cannot potentially possess beauty, or in which the potential of beauty is not present. We may not see the beauty of the horse in the gangly coat, but it is there, coming into manifestation. We cannot see the beauty of the oak tree in the acorn, but it is there. Therefore, beauty has a subsistence apart from forms. Second proof, it can exist where forms do not exist. Therefore, it can exist apart entirely from such symbolic shapes and shadows as we associate with form. Beauty can exist in the pure substance of idea. Idea is without shape, but it has a nature. It is therefore archetypal. An idea may be symmetrical, though without a body. An idea may be harmonious, though without a shape, form, or dimension, as far as we can recognize the same. And because beauty can exist in both the form and the formless, it must be superior to both form and formlessness. Because no thing can exist in two separate states unless in its own nature it is superior to both states. If it is not superior to both, it will be locked in one. Thus we go back to the problem of the priority of knowledge in the Pythagorean theory. Pythagoras bestowed priority upon mathematics and considered mathematics the symbol of absolute beauty. He made a triad of mathematics, astronomy, and music. But he pointed out that both astronomy and music require mathematics, and that it can flow into either and must. But if you remove either astronomy or music, you do not destroy mathematics, because being capable of being diffused through both other sciences or arts, it is superior. But, conversely, as a proof of superiority, if you destroy mathematics, you destroy both astronomy and music with it. So that which by its destruction destroys all dependent upon it is superior to them. And that which by its destruction does not destroy, that which is superior to itself in this concatenation, is by this virtue inferior. Thus, any beautiful thing can be destroyed. War has shown us that. Yet beauty is indestructible, therefore it cannot be identified with these things. Beauty exists in every art and science, therefore it cannot be identified with these, at least not one in particular. Having a separate existence in the state of morality, it is therefore resident in the soul. But it is not morality, although morality is a reflection or a specialization of it. The sublimity of the intellect may also be a manifestation of beauty. For the perfect mind, perfectly thinking the thought of God, is supremely beautiful. Yet beauty is not mind. Also, beauty is not merely thought. Because if beauty was thought, it could not exist in the mindless. But it does. It exists most magnificently in a crystalline structure in a rock. Beauty is therefore superior also to mind, because mind can go and beauty remain. We know that, because beauty was here before mind came. Therefore we can have no doubt. We also have the thoughtless beauty of children, which arises from their natural instincts and not their thoughts. And we have the magnificent beauty of the flight of a bird or the leap of a deer. Yet these things rise not from philosophy, nor morality, nor ethics, but from the instinct and nature of these creatures. Therefore beauty lies in instinct also, not in mind alone. Then we can go on beyond the mystery of mind. And we can find that the mind, deeply and gravely perturbed, cannot achieve beauty because of its own disturbance. And in its extremity turns from itself to faith, and there finds beauty. Therefore, in the stillness of the mind and the simple acceptance of good, we find the eternal presence of beauty. And perhaps there is nothing more beautiful than man's simple and complete acceptance of the reality of the divinity of things unseen and unknowable. Thus man, reaching toward his Creator, builds convictions, patterns, dreams within himself, some mental and some surpassing mind. Socrates, shortly before his death, thinking of the condition of the state into which he was to pass, declared that factually he had no knowledge of this state, that to him it had always been an unexplored country which he longed to visit. He knew that to visit that country by drinking the hemlock, he must leave not only his body but perhaps his mind also, certainly his physical brain. that he might, as he says, be going into an infinite sleep from which there is no awaking. Also, he might be going into this better land than he had ever known. He might be going to this world where the gods dwelt, and where all the answers were for the questions that he could find no answers in his books or in his world as he knew it. And so at the end, not with great thought, but with the faith of a small child, Socrates went forth to the great adventure, completely at peace. And his disciples knew that this peace was also a kind of beauty. For there is great beauty in great peace. And peace comes usually not from the mind, but from the relaxation of the mind in the presence of something vaster than itself. The beauty of prayer comes not from thought, but from faith. Because man cannot even clearly envision in his mind the substance of that to which he prays. Yet in his faith he finds a great peace, and this peace is order, and this order is the internal experience of law, the sense that all things are inevitably right, and the realization of this rightness is in itself an effulgent beauty within man. And so we quest onward to the beauty, to that which is essentially the principle of beauty. And it vanishes, as Plotinus tells us, in the effulgent nature of the One, the eternal God, in whose heart and soul the roots of beauty are hidden, which man cannot in that substance or immediate apperception know. Now Plotinus was a man with very practical thinking in his mind, and to him the concept of the beautiful implied man's quest of it, or the power of man to increase in beauty, to increase in his own internal apperception of this quality. Therefore, I'm just going to read a few more lines from the more mature part of this essay, in which it is gradually reaching this climax of utility. But you will ask, after what manner is this beauty of the worthy soul to be perceived? It is thus. Recall your thoughts inward, and if while contemplating yourself you do not perceive yourself beautiful, then imitate the statuary, who, when he desires a beautiful statue, cuts away what is superfluous, smooths and polishes what is rough, and never desists until he has given it all the beauty his art is able to effect. In this manner must you proceed, by lopping what is luxuriant, directing what is oblique, and by purgation, illustrating what is obscure. And thus you continue to polish and beautify your statue, until the divine splendor of virtue shines upon you, and temperance, seated in pure and holy majesty, rises to your view. If you thus become purified, residing in yourself, and having nothing any longer to impede this unity of mind, and no further mixture to be found therein, but perceiving your whole self to be a true light, and light alone, a light which, though immense, is not measured by any magnitude, nor limited by any circumscribing figure, but is everywhere immeasurable, as being greater than every measure, and more excellent than every quality. If perceiving yourself thus improved, and trusting solely to yourself, as no longer requiring a guide, fix now steadfastly your mental view, for with the intellectual eye alone can such immense beauty be perceived. But if your eye is yet infected with any sordid concern, and not thoroughly refined, while it is on the stretch to behold this most shining spectacle, it will be immediately darkened and incapable of intuition, though someone should declare the spectacle present, which it might otherwise be able to discern. Now, this point is developed gradually through the text, but on the theurgic level, this being the seventh part of the Neoplatonic discipline, Plotinus gives us certain instructions. He says, first of all, no soul or psychic entity, such as man, can perceive a beauty superior to itself. And between man's inward power to perceive and the outward objects of his perception is imposed the nature of himself, with its limitations, its shortcomings, and most of all, its lack of discipline. Therefore, man, seeking about him to solve the mystery of the beautiful, may first be satisfied only with external forms, as the first rungs of a ladder leading upward to the ineffable. Outward forms, by their symmetries, may satisfy him, because he is not yet aware of internal or eternal qualities. But as the statuary, making his statue, must reveal beauty or release it through his own psychic life, through the truing of the stone, an allegory, incidentally, derived from Socrates, so the human being discovers the beauty in himself by releasing it from the deformities of imperfection. Each individual, therefore, becomes a sculptor, and he accomplishes his end not by creating beauty, but by releasing it. And the allegory is so subtle and so mysteriously true that you have to think of it twice. Someone once congratulated Socrates because he had made a very beautiful statue. And he, with his usual modesty, disclaimed the credit, which he said belonged to the gods and the muses who had inspired him, because always in this piece of marble the statue had been there. It was always beautiful. No one could add anything to its beauty. No one really could subtract anything from that beauty except by destroying the statue. All he, Socrates, had done was to take away those parts of the stone which were not supposed to be there. And what was left was beauty. He had released. He had not created. Thus, in the perfection of the human soul, by the correction of its vices, by the moderation of its excesses, by the maintenance of its temperances, man does not create beauty. He permits it to manifest according to its own nature. Thus, man does not become beauty. He becomes beautiful, because beauty is released through him by keeping the laws of its own kind. Now, as Plotinus proceeds in this essay, we can understand immediately that by beauty he now means also something else. He regards beauty in its ultimate form as an apatheistic state by which man is capable of the experience of the sovereign beauty of reality. Thus, the beauty now becomes the mystical experience. It becomes illumination. It becomes the state of man's at one-ment with the sublime substance of total being. And he himself described that on certain occasions this beatific state had been accorded to him, and that for a moment he had dwelt in a state of measureless, timeless identity with being, and that this identity was the supreme beauty the absolute and perfect release or expression of beauty upon and through the human soul. For he beheld in that moment all things beautiful. And this was the mystical experience. Not that he should behold the secrets of all things, nor should he speak with the voice of men and of angels, nor that should he have all knowledge, or all skill, or that wisdom should reveal and unfold through him all of its mysteries and its works. These are not the things that happened in those magnificent moments of the perfection of the theurgic mystery. All that Plotinus had known was infinite being in its infinite beauty. Not a sensible beauty to the mind or a corporeal beauty to the body, but a transcendent ecstasy, that magnificent, complete and total participation in the infinite satisfaction of infinite beauty. He then, as he tells us in other works, became aware of the body of God, and that body was beauty walking alone. And he tells us also that no one shall find beauty who does not discover the magnificent, ecstatic, radiant loveliness of walking alone. That in some mysterious way, in aloneness, we have achieved a unity, a freedom from parts, from the concepts of divisions, from the discords and dissonances. So beauty, like the blessed damozel, walks alone. Even as in the dawn of time, according to the story in Genesis, the Lord walked in the garden in the cool of the evening. And this experience of the immanence, the omnipresence of deity, as the exquisite expression of perfect beauty, is not merely the experience of an artist. Plotinus was not an artist, in our sense of the word. He was not a painter or a sculptor, nor was he a musician as we know it. Yet all these beauties were in it also, and with the wonderful sensitivity of his soul he knew these things. But it was even a greater and more sublime beauty. For in it his own soul rushed forth, not in gladness, but in that absolute love, that complete and entire self-forgetfulness, and rushed toward the embracing of the beloved, which is, of course, in the mystic allegory, reunion or identification with God. Thus, the soul, in itself disciplined to the apperception of truth, beheld it blazing forth from the universe. And in that instant, in that tremendous experience, the great artist, the great mystic was born. For now, the being walks forever in the beauty of the garden. And the whole world reveals its numerous and manifold manifestations of beauty. And each beauty is seen as lawful. And Plotinus describes this lawfulness of the manyness of beauty. But the soul that has found the beautiful no longer needs to say, this is beautiful, this is not beautiful. For all things are beauty coming of age. All things are this infinite magnificence, unfolding, releasing, growing, blossoming, and the bearing of its fruit. This, to Plotinus, could come only to the human being who had cultivated the noblest of beauty in himself. And this cultivation meant the gradual renunciation, step by step, of every attitude, every thought, every motion and emotion that was not gracious, that was not kind, that was not loving, that did not in itself possess some quality of beauty more obviously revealed than in these negative and destructive modes of expression. Thus, through the cultivation of beauty, man comes to fathom the mystery of the beautiful, because all beauty leads to the beautiful, which is none of these things, but abides in the midst of them, and is all of them. Thus, by degrees, Plotinus tells us that religion is man's search for the beautiful. It is a search for that power of God which causes rejoicing. And in this, there is a point that perhaps represents one of the reasons for a conflict between Plotinus and the early church. Plotinus could not conceive of a religion of fear. He could not conceive of men being good because they were afraid to be bad. He could not conceive of a universe in which a principle of sin could gain even passing dominion over good. Nor could he conceive of worship as a sadness, as a sorrowing, as a continuous offering up of weaknesses and failings and shortcomings. He could not think of men born in sin and conceived in iniquity. There was no part of that in his way of life. He could not think of millions of human beings praying to be forgiven, or all the strange doubts that infest the deathbeds of the conscience-laden. To Plotinus, religion was a gracious, glorious motion, a worship of the eternal beauty by simply being beautiful. Not outwardly, but inwardly. Not in body alone, though this need not be neglected, but in so living that the inward life was radiant with grace, with charm, with thoughtfulness and gentleness, with kindliness and consideration, and most perhaps of all with a great joy. For as he tells us, it is with joy that the soul comes forth to embrace the beautiful. We do not go timidly and miserably to give our hearts to those whom we love in this world. Young lovers do not go in tears and mourning to each other. Nor should man's soul, the eternal child of the eternal, fear to go radiantly home to its Father. Therefore, in this concept of Plotinus, all things grow graciously, beautifully, and beauty is therefore an endless rejoicing in the doing of those things which are true and beautiful. In this, then, we see the philosophy of beauty spreading itself over many departments and ways of life. And finally, because of his own mystical apperceptions and because of the amazing beauty and sensitiveness of his own soul, Plotinus begins to contemplate the nature of God as beauty. It is not in this essay, but it is in other works of his. And he begins to think of God no longer as a great ordaining power. He is no longer thinking of God as power. He is no longer thinking of God as law. He is rather thinking of God as love. And he is assuming that there can be no beauty in the relationships of creatures to each other or to their Creator except through that beauty which is love. Love, therefore, rejoices in the service of the beloved. Love gives of itself and finds its fullness. Love moves always graciously and with gentleness of spirit, and finds in these gentle fulfillments, a strange over-artistry that is the sovereign beauty of creation. So in Plotinus, the contemplation upon the infinite as love reveals essentially that to know God is to love God. And in knowing God, the first grand vision that we have of the eternal shape or substance is an incredible blaze of ineffable beauty, beyond definition, beyond description. And that this beauty, therefore, brings with it a sense of security. Man is not afraid of the beautiful. He is hardly aware of his own instinct as he rushes forth to it. He loves it because it is beautiful. And he learns to love God because God is beautiful. And love the world because the world is beautiful. And to love the soul of his neighbor because in spite of the darkness which obscures the body, within is the radiant prismatic soul, forever beautiful. And in the discovery of beauty in himself, man discovers the beauty in others and can no longer have an enemy. In discovering the beauty in himself, man gains an incredible patience because he sees how difficult it is when he disciplines his own nature to release and redeem this subtle quality of beauty within himself. Therefore, he no longer wonders why others are not better. He knows that in their hearts they are growing, and that this same beauty that sustains him will flow through them and bring them to the fullness of their own purposes. So prejudice ceases, conceits cease, worldliness ceases, because where man's treasure is, there his heart is. And when his treasure is in ineffable beauty, there also his heart and his mind are united. So out of the life of beauty comes a great discipline of theology and mysticism. A mysticism that appeals to the sensitive, emotional quotient of the soul. The mind seeks for the beautiful. The heart finds it. And the heart and mind in this partnership serve a wonderful purpose. For what the mind discovers, the heart experiences. And through these minglings of their purposes, again a unity is formed from diversity. And a heart-mind power united gains the singleness of eye which can see the beauty of unity. So Plotinus says, as man brings his own nature into a unity, he is capable of perceiving unity, which is true beauty. As long as there are two faculties in his own mind, there will be two factions in his world. As long as he himself thinks of 9 parts of his own character, he will find 9 men outside of himself. He will find 9 kinds of life if he lives 9 kinds of life. But when in himself he lives but one kind of life, he will then find in the world only one kind, because he has discovered it. And when man, through his growth, has gradually overcome all difference and division, until finally he can find and establish a one life in himself, in that instant the universe blazes forth the mystery of one life. And only the one who has brought his own parts into a greater unity can ever experience God, the supreme unity, because the things that man and God have most in common is the union in themselves. Thus, any being which achieves the complete possession of its own parts and organizes them into a purposed pattern, by that unity partakes of all unity existing in time and space. This unity, again, is another name for sovereign beauty, and so the story goes. Out of it then comes worship, a most simple meditation, a purifying of life, and the simple summary of all of the Plotinus disciplines, namely, that man approaches truth, achieves peace, attains eternal security by restoring the oneness in himself, and that in this restoration his most wonderful and acceptable and useful instrument is his appreciation for beauty. For wherever it is a little living thing, growing perhaps in the shadow of the dead. Wherever the green branch of beauty is to be found within man, there is life. And while that life remains, it can grow and achieve its own immortality. Man's love of beauty is the final proof, therefore, of his possible attainment of all good things. And that he has beauty in himself decrees his ultimate identity with deity, the supreme and complete power of beauty in the universe. Well, our time is up.